guys, it's Mousy again with another forum roleplay review. First up, I would like to apologise. I don't know if you can hear the background noise here tonight. My house is basically a small sauna, so I've got the aircon going full bore. So if that's creating any difficulty to hear, I'm really sorry, but I cannot live without it at this point. A few other things before I really get started. I am also now taking review requests via Tumblr, and you can find the link to that in the description for this video. And all reviews from now on will also be posted to Tumblr, so I'd like to reiterate that nothing that I do or say in these videos is ever designed to bring anyone down. What I want to do is I want to inspire you to make the changes that you might not have thought of. And as always, anything that I have to say is absolutely and only a reflection of what I would do differently, not what you should do. If there is something that you love and I don't love it, don't listen to me. Listen to you. Because the biggest mistake that I see admins making time and time again is going and changing things based on someone else's opinion or on what they think is correct and not listening to themselves. So if there is absolutely anything, it doesn't matter what it is, if you love it, keep it. Please. Don't listen to me, keep it. But you know, that said, the things that I do have to say are based on my own experience of what works and what doesn't. And it might just be that you need to reconsider the way that you implement things as opposed to throwing them out completely. So these video reviews are only an idea of how things could be done differently on your site. They are absolutely not rules. Please don't ever take them that way. I never ever want to be that person who tells people how to run their roleplay. Only you know how to run the roleplay that you want. So that said, today I am reviewing Beyond Redemption, which is a original supernatural roleplay, and it has been submitted to me by Kura, which I hope I said that right. I'm never great with pronouncing names. From RPGD, which is where my main review shop is set up, and as I said before, you can also submit reviews to me via Tumblr if you are not a member of RPGD. If you're not a member of RPGD or RPG Initiative, which is where you can also find me, I very much recommend them as communities to be part of as a roleplay admin or even as a roleplay member. I've learned a lot through those two sites. And they're awesome places for discussion. So now that I've got all of the business out of the way, I'm sorry. Beyond Redemption. So this is the first bit that we get to see when we load the page. This is in Chrome, as I usually do. I love Chrome for its developer tools, so everything that I load in Chrome first. One thing that I will note is that the banner image is possibly not as good quality as it could be. It's looking a little stretched on my screen. If we bring it down a little bit, no, it's not going to do it. So you might want to look at getting a slightly higher quality image, unless this is the look you're going for, that slightly grainy. It's looking a little bit blurred on the edges to me, but that could be my terrible eyes. I do have terrible eyes. And especially the text is where I'm seeing a little bit of fuzz, and that second line there especially is quite difficult to read. Speaking of things that are difficult to read, this dark, if it'll do it for me, this dark red on the grey. I cannot read red on grey. Again, that could be just me, or it could be a common thing. It's something worth asking your members and your staff about, whether you want to lighten that up a bit. Just on the text, the borders and the block colours are fine, but when it comes to text, you really need to make sure that the contrast between your background colour and your text colour is significant enough that people with eyes that are not especially great, and I do have good color vision, but I struggle especially with things like dark colors on grey. They are very close. Um, so looking down here, we've got some awesome buttons here that you get you right through to what you want. I love that. I always love that. Little scrolly box with some information, which is good. I don't mind smaller text for things like this because you can. It's not a priority to read that. Scrolling down, we've got a toggle sidebar, which is amazing. The one thing that I would probably suggest is if you're going to have a toggle sidebar, the main point of a toggle sidebar is so that members on a mobile device can shove it out of the way. As you can see, when that toggles, it still keeps it in position. It's just not displayed. If you could get that so that when you toggle the sidebar, it disappears completely or goes into a little box, and your forums move over to this sort of area here, thus widening out the available space for reading on a mobile device, which is really, really important, depending on how many people you've got in your community that do access the site via mobile. Um, those sorts of design things very much depend on your community. For me, it's become more of a priority this time around because a lot of my members only access the site via mobile now. So it's something to think about, especially if you're finding that people are going to look at your store. Sorry, I just read store somewhere. Where did I read store? I don't know. Especially when I find that people are going to your site, having a look at it, and then deciding no and going somewhere else, which you mentioned was a problem that you seem to be having. People checking out Beyond Redemption and then joining another site that is basically Beyond Redemption's twin. So it might be that you've got these design aspects that don't necessarily fit your intended audience. So that would be one thing to look at, is getting that toggle sidebar to be more of a push sidebar. I think the one is the one that a lot of people use, that allows the forum to take up that room that is usually taken up by the sidebar. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with what you've got. It's just another thing to consider. Another thing that I'm noticing here is, and this is absolute downright nitpicking, which is that this box here doesn't line up with the bottom of these boxes, which just looks a little bit untidy. And the same with this edge here going outside of that. If there is a way that you could fix that, you might. I don't know. I think it would look nice. But it's by no means a deal breaker for me or for most people with half a brain. If you're going to do side-by-side forums, I highly recommend doing them in pairs, because otherwise you've got this big giant space that is a little bit confusing in a lot of ways. Yeah, because you've got just a giant, big, glaring piece of white space that's not filled with anything. I'm not sure exactly what you could put in there, but I'm sure that you could find some sort of relevant topic, or even condense these down a little bit into 2 forums rather than 3. Like your news could quite easily go into there. And you could do claims and wanted ads in there, which means you then wouldn't have this white subforum space either, which could be quite neat. Obviously I can't speak to your in-character forums, but it's another thing to consider, is just adding another forum in there so that you've got a bit of balance visually. So that's basically what I'm seeing on the index. The biggest problem that I'm seeing is these darker coloured links and dark red on the grey. Grey is a gorgeous colour, but it does not play nice with dark colours. It just really, really doesn't. Like the yellow looks fantastic, the green looks fantastic, the red I'm struggling to read a lot. Okay, so let's get into your topics. Just have a quick look at this as well. So you just got a lot going on there, which is cool. Sorry, there we go. So you got a nice little bit of activity there, which is always good. If you're going to have a C box, be in it. Don't put it there and then forget about it. Just be part of it. Okay, so we've got credits here, which is always nice. We've got the population thing. Okay, so similar to what I said about the grey being not playing very nice with your darker colours, white doesn't play as well with brighter colours. So you've got this one in particular I'm finding hard to read, and that yellow there. I know that you've got a consistent colour scheme for your member groups, and I'll be honest, I've not managed to completely solve the problem myself, but it might be worth looking into things like text backgrounds or shadows or something like that that's really going to help those colours stand out, depending on whether they're on a light or dark background. Alright, so let's have a look at your plot. Right. I like that this is a thing, but I hate having to fill it in all the time. We can't have everything. Okay. So, first thing I notice is the text size, and this is another thing that I harp on about all the time, which is font sizes less than 12 or 13. 12 is usually a good start, 13 is better. That I can read with no problem. There's not really any need for it to be smaller than that. I really don't believe there is, because once you start getting smaller than that, you're really getting into things that are considering the look of the text more than the usefulness of the text. At least that's what I've found. It's nice to have text that looks pretty, but there's not much point to it if it's difficult to read. Another one is line height that you might want to look into. 140 to 160 is usually where I sit mine, and if you look at that, I can read that so easily now. And it does stretch things out down a bit. And even these headers, you could quite easily change to something a little bit more header-like. Up the size a bit, maybe change the color, do whatever you like. They do stand out as headings, but if you're going to up this text size, boosting the size of your headings will help that to balance as well. But otherwise, this is all looking good. You might want to think about breaking up the paragraphs a little bit, and you've also got your ragged right here, which is a left aligned paragraph without justification, but down here you've got it all centered. I'm not sure if that's by design or if that's just what's happened when you've put these into center tags, but if it's not by design, it is actually easier to read a ragged right paragraph than it is to read a centered paragraph. So that's another thing to think about. And if you've ever met me before, you know that I will harp on about readability of text until my voice goes. So again, don't ever feel like this is something that you have to change. It's just something that if I was to walk in and take charge of the site, it would be one of the first things that I would change. Um, and I don't know if it's something that would be losing you members. I honestly can't say that, but yeah, it is something that I would recommend. So face claims. Okay. I need to know. I really need to know why these narrow templates are a thing. They just seem very unnecessary to me. There's so much more available room than what is there. Um, and I really don't feel like it takes away anything from the design if you do have things set to 100 or 90% just width. And whenever you're using percentage widths as well, you're also making them that little bit more easy to access on a mobile device, which again, if that's something that matters to you, because these will squish down and change. I've just done that one there. These will squish down and change depending on what device you're looking at. So you've got, like, I don't see how that is terribly different to that. I honestly believe that this is better. Um, it doesn't need to be 300 pixels wide. And when you've got people accessing it from both desktops and iPads and laptops and screens of all sizes, the more that you can set things to a percentage width rather than a pixel width, the more compatible your site is going to be with more devices. So that's something to think about. I'm a little bit confused about the sudden use of the purple or mauve or light maroon, or I'm not sure exactly what you call it, but it does feel a little bit out of whack with the rest of your site. If you're going to use anything, you'd go back to using the red and grey. And again, I'd probably reconsider these colours because there's nothing. I can kind of read them, but I am struggling. And again, the text size is set at 10, but when we change it to 13, there's not really a giant difference in how pretty it is. In fact, when you set it to 13, those colours are significantly easier to read than they were when they were set at 10. So that's something to think about. Yeah, I don't understand the need for text to be small and for tables to be narrow in posts. Like, I just don't understand it. Um, and I find something like this so much easier to navigate and to understand, and especially from my phone and things like that. So that's another thing to consider. Cannons, I will say, when you're referring to cannons as something that is already belonging to a universe, it's cannons with a single N. Cannons with a double N is the thing that goes boom, and it's one of the biggest, most common mistakes, and it took me years to get it right. Um, so I'm not picking on you there. It's an easy thing to do, but yeah, just something to watch. Okay, so angels. Let's have a look at them. This is cute. I like this. I like that it's full width. I don't like scrolly boxes. I really don't like scrolly boxes, but I can see why they're a thing in this. So yeah, there's nothing hugely there that I would change. Just again, the text size. Always the text size. It is already 12, so that's good. Even bumped up to 13 is no real issue. Um, So yeah, that one's quite fine. Your canon lists, there's nothing wrong there. Frequently asked questions. That's a very slick way of doing this. I quite like it. It is intuitive, which is good. A lot of these things that hide text within posts are not intuitive. And you've also got it stated there. Again, font size. If we bump that up to 13, you'll see that we don't really lose anything because you've got your scroll in there as well. And probably in that one, line height as well. Set that at 150%. No, too high. 130? 130 is good. It just creates a bit more space around the text and makes it easier to discern one line from the next, which you can also do a bit by breaking up paragraphs a little bit more, which maybe this one you would want to. So yeah, this is a good setup. I will say again that you've got that same maroony color, which doesn't quite fit with this. It clashes just a little bit. Okay, let's look at rules. Get rid of that. Again, you know what I'm gonna say. Font size. Test it out. Beautiful. Now, secret words in rules are something that I used to do, and I know from a lot of discussions that they can be a huge turn off for members. They can give the impression that you don't trust members, um, or that your level of enforcement is going to be something that they will find overwhelming. People who are looking for a relaxed site will walk away the minute they see that particular phrase. And again, I know this from experience. We used to have a 5 keyword set that used to be found through our rules, and in the end, I got rid of it. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if people read your rules. It really doesn't. As long as they behave in line with the rules, you can accept that they've read them. Anyone who behaves outside of those rules, you can then say, you then have the ability to say, hey, you should have read the rules, you should have known that this is a no-go, and you still have the right to stop bad behavior whether someone has read the rules or not. So I no longer understand the need to have secret phrases in there, and it is something that I very much recommend getting rid of. It goes back to an older tradition of forum roleplay where things were a lot more controlling. And I'm talking about the days where admins would start sites but not socialize with their players at all. Because there was this idea that the admin had to be in control and above everyone. And that's sort of the school that I started with, but I've got. I've become a lot more lenient, and that is the way that I do things now. But this is one thing that does come up a lot in deal breaker style topics. When people see this, they immediately get an impression of the staff that is not necessarily who you are. So, as much as I understand that you want people to read the rules, think about what your real requirements are and what is here that is absolutely critical that people need to read every single word, because a lot of the rules that are in roleplay sites these days are very basic. Um, People read them anyway. I I find I've not found any difference between people who did read the rules and people who didn't read the rules since I ditched the keyword um, process. So I do very much recommend that. I am basically begging you to ditch it. I promise you that the world will not explode. There will be people that don't read them, that do their own thing, but trust me, there'll be people who do that anyway, even if this process is in place. Um, so you've got very comprehensive rules here, and I would recommend cutting down any of that word count wherever you can. Um, Look at each paragraph and really ask yourself what exactly it is that you want to achieve. Um, and say it in as few words as possible. So you've got a lot of stuff here, which look through it. Long rules can be a bit overwhelming to new members, and especially with that secret phrase, it does look quite overbearing. Um, which isn't to say that you are. I do not believe that you are at all, but that is the impression that people will get. Um, so yeah, things like this, giving accounts away, not many people do it. It's not usually enough of a concern. A lot of these rules you can probably drop, and then if they become a problem later on in the future, you can add them back. Um, if something hasn't been an issue, feel free to drop the rule. It's about keeping things simple, easy to understand, and yeah, just say what you need to say in as few words as possible. There's a lot here on about your theme as well, which I'm going to imagine is you've had a lot of characters that are focused on romance only. A lot of that happens. That does happen, and sometimes you do need to put regulations in place, or at least make it clear that your goal isn't for things like that. But be wary of any wording that sounds like um, people who are interested in those sorts of plots are going to be punished in some way. Um, that is pretty much just a yeah, should never be a thing. So yeah, a lot of this is stuff you could probably get rid of, if I'm being perfectly honest. Um, so yeah, go through it yourself, and the rules are more than a year old, so it's almost 2 years old. So it probably is time to go through your rule set and critique them yourself and ask yourself, does this reflect the admin that I am now? Does it reflect the admin that I want to be? And does it reflect the culture of the site that I want to create? And then delete about 10 words from every sentence, which is the advice that I got as an editor. And I do find that it makes you really consider what is important to you and what is important to the points that you want to make, and it will help you cut down a lot of these words and really get things streamlined. So, application. Next thing that I'm going to notice is that your application actually sits outside of that. I don't know if that's intentional, but it looks a little bit weird to me. So this is a shipper app. Okay. This whole shipper app thing is new to me. Oh, that's the shipper thing. Okay. I really don't understand it. When you're posting code, add in spaces between where the text goes and where the code resumes. So just like a few line breaks in there and a few line breaks in there, so that when people copy and paste it, they can see very, very clearly where their text is supposed to go, because it can be a bit challenging. And also on that note, when it comes to templates like this, putting what is supposed to go after those headings in parentheses. So you'd have name, end div, parentheses, name, so that when people, again, when they copy and paste it, they can see, okay, that spot there is where the name goes, and they can just replace it. Not everyone is as good with HTML as the people who code these. I'm pretty terrible with HTML. And anytime I do something like this, I need to go back and I need to put my little markers in so that I can find where I'm up to in the code and read it more easily. Okay, species, always fun. Again, font size, font size, font size, font size. You might want to add a space in there so that your pictures aren't touching the paragraph above. Just make it a little bit neater. Centered paragraphs, again, I just don't like them. That's entirely on me. Powers and abilities. I would probably change this to an unordered list, so that then all of the points line up and it looks nice. And this is a little bit hard to follow, just a little bit. I would make these headings bigger. I would put some bolding over your main aspects, just things like that. Just tidy it up a little bit. There is a lot of information here and it is quite hard to follow. Again, font size. If it's below 12 pixels, I am struggling, always. Wanted ads. So those are cool, but again, you've got the purple here, which doesn't really gel with the rest of the site. If you're going to use templates, trying to find templates that match a pre-existing skin or making them match a pre-existing skin can be a lot of trouble, but it's worth it. It does create a more cohesive brand, and yeah, people will recognize things as your site as opposed to someone else's template on your site, if that makes sense. Member directory. So this is the post. Okay. They do look pretty cool. I like that. I would probably make the padding, because you've got that. What's going on here? Because that's not sitting right. Because that should be equally balanced, if I'm right. See how I can fix it. Don't know how. But yeah, what I'm seeing is that the post itself is not wide enough for that. There it is. So yeah, that's something to look at. That's how it should display. Which, as you can see, there's even padding on either side. But because your body isn't wide enough, it's squishing it down. So that's something to consider as well, is making sure that all of your templates are the right width for your site, because when things overhang like that, it can look very messy and unfinished. Now, So we've gone through all of this. Got some pretty little hover things, which is cool. Clickable header, which is what I like. Now, let's see what else I can find. Now this does not look right to me at all. Let's see. So if you make the width of those down to 46, 44, 42, 42%, they will fit, regardless of screen size. So if I squish it down or don't squish it down, they're still in the right spot. And when you go to mobile, they will still sit right, whether you're on a Galaxy S5 or an iPhone 8 Plus. So that's another thing that I would very much recommend, is changing that from, that's your topic row, changing it from the pixel width to 42%. Because yeah, then you've got a whole lot more flexibility and you don't get it looking like that. You don't want this. This is not happy. This makes my brain go, what? Okay, so we've looked at the rules. Posting guidelines. Okay, so you've got templates. If you've got a topic that's full of templates, I would link that here. I love this rule. Allowing swear words and discouraging people from using them all the time is probably the best way to go. There's nothing clever about dropping the F-bomb every second word. It's not mature, and it's not funny, and it's not even interesting. I like encouraging people to find different ways to insult other characters. You can get a whole lot more out of it. Okay, we've got secret words in here as well. Alright, and you've got your tag codes. So I'm just going to go back to the rules for a minute. Okay, so if you're going to have keywords across multiple topics, make sure people know which topics they're in. Because that's a very easy way to get people lost, and a little bit overwhelmed. So you need to outline which topics you want people to read, and if you're going to keep the keywords, what topics they can find them in. When I did it, I had the keywords only in my rules, because that one topic carried everything that was very, very important to me at the time that I decided people had to read. So you've also got chat etiquette as well, which I believe you also covered in your main rules topic. So be aware of anything that you're doing more than you have to. Normally your site rules, because I think you've got in here as well a bit on posting guidelines and what is and isn't allowed, which is your character and in-character rules. So yeah, think about how you've got those divided up, and whether you need this particular lot of rules in this section if you're going to have character guideline, posting guidelines and chat etiquette as well. Make sure that, so you've got your out of character rules here, your posting guides and in character rules here, and your chat rules. I wouldn't even think that you would need a separate topic for chat rules. I would just put it in there. Okay, bank and store. Okay, so people can buy things. That's pretty cool. Um, I always get a little bit wary of things that say must read, no ifs, ands, and buts. It can come off as a bit aggressive. Um, One rule that I was taught in marketing was avoiding any negative terms. So never use, oh, okay, here I go. Never is a bad word. Don't is a bad word. No is a bad word. Encourage the behavior that you want, and only ever use negative words if there's no other way to phrase it. Um, so here you would use something like important reading, um, rather than must read, which sounds like it needs a whip crack after it. I'll be honest. Um, but yeah, we've had a look through all of this. I think if people are looking through your site and walking away to another very similar one, it could have a lot to do with the way that things are written. Um, and certainly those keywords, they do worry me a lot as a guestie. Um, so yeah, considering very hard how you want to proceed with that sort of thing will get you a long way, I think. Um, because yeah, there's a big push at the moment to boards that are more relaxed, more open, more friendly, and I don't think that your rules as they are reflect that yet. If that's the sort of admin, if you want to be an admin that has that open and welcoming presence, your documentation is letting you down. It's letting you down a lot, um, and that's quite a shame because you seem like such a nice and awesome person. Um, but yeah, whenever I read things like you must be over the age of 18, it's very final. It's very final, which in some respects it should be. Um, do not give your account to anyone. Possibly something like I don't know. I would drop that rule completely, because I've never had any issue with that. Things like no flaming. There's a few rules that I spotted that are in relation to out of character conduct and just generally respecting people and the admin team. Um, so things like this could be quite as simple as, you know, be respectful, friendly, open, and keep all drama off site, rather than simply saying no flaming, which is again quite an aggressive way to word it. Use can wherever you can rather than don't. Avoid anything that says must. Where you use must, try and use please. It completely changes the way that your site is perceived. It might seem like a really small thing, but please register as main where all your characters will be on. Okay. This isn't very clear. You must register. So what you're essentially saying is that you want people to create a main account first and then create their sub accounts. Um, so perhaps explaining what an out of character account is. Um, oh, please register a player account, in all caps and then link your characters. I will say as well that you can actually manage that with CSS if people don't do it. But enforcing a particular look with the text is another thing that I've dropped quite recently. I'm pretty bored by it, but if it's important to you, it is important to you. Gender restrictions, I understand fully why some people have them, but they can be a turn off for some players where they feel that they may be limited if they don't play men as well as women, or oh, there, okay. Um, admins are excluded is never, ever, ever a good look. Full stop. Never. Anytime a guest gets the impression that members are held to different standards than admins, even if there's a reason for it, they do get the wrong impression. Any rules that you make for your members need to be for yourself as well. Every time. There really isn't any exception to that. Because you want to be part of a community, and communities are not cohesive when there are two classes of people. There will always be your leaders and your members, but your leaders should be held to the same standard or even higher than that of the members. You should be leading by example, which means that you shouldn't be able to be included. And if the reason for your exclusion is that you generally have both genders on your lists, then you've got no reason to exclude yourself from that rule, if that makes sense. But gender requirements or restrictions are usually a turn-off as well for members. And you've also got there the misconception that there are only two genders, which will turn off a lot of your non-binary guests as well, because life is way more complex than male and female. We do not wish for you to be overwhelmed. I find that players becoming overwhelmed by the number of characters they play is a line they have to reach for themselves. I manage about 8 characters confidently. I know people who manage 25 characters with no problem at all. But you give me a 9th character and I start falling. There are better ways to manage this than to set hard restrictions. And it should never be the admin's decision that someone is getting overwhelmed unless it's really, really obvious that they are. If someone has created 10 characters and 3 of them are starting to fall, that's what sort of when you step in and you act, when those 3 characters aren't being as active as they could be. That's sort of when you step in and you say, hey, look, you've taken on a lot, maybe it's time to sort of step back a little bit. And that gives your members the freedom to run as many characters as they feel comfortable with, without feeling like they need to fit into a restriction. Especially when you've got your gender restrictions. If I didn't feel comfortable writing male characters, that then restricts me to 3 characters, not 5. Simply because I'm not confident in my ability to play men. Which there's nothing inherently wrong with either. So at this point in time, your site really isn't allowing that level of freedom, which is something to think about. Do not fill out the official face claim form, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, except that it can be worded differently. Something as, once your character is accepted, please fill out the official face claim form. That gives people a sense of order in which they're expected to do things. Rather than saying don't do it, tell them when to do it. Which is where I'm going to go into my next topic, which is a quick start guide, which is what you might benefit from when you've got multiple topics that you expect to be read. Because if I hadn't gone anywhere but those links that you've got at the top, I would not have found the chat etiquette and the posting guidelines. So that's another thing that you might find troubling. Again, once your character has been accepted, you can post up want ads. Avoid the negative language. Really, really avoid it. So you've got posting guidelines linked there, which is good. Those links don't stand out very much against the black text, so that's something to think about, is making those links. Usually I set my CSS to bold links as well, so that it's a bit more obvious. Okay, this is quite harsh. 100 is not hard. 100 is I could dribble 100 words with no problem. So it's not an issue of the post count itself. It's the threat to delete the post, um, which is quite upsetting for some people. That if they post 99 words as opposed to 100, they may lose their work. It also can be a limiting factor. So where you've got a numerical count, people will focus on that number, and they might feel overwhelmed and find it hard to reach 100, even though it's not very much at all. Or they might be in a space instead where they get to 100 and okay, that's the mandatory post count, so I must be done. Again, I find that leading by example is a much better solution than a post count, and having a respect rule as well is I've found very effective. Which basically means that whatever people post, whatever your thread partner posts, is what you're expected to sort of. That's the realm of what you're expected to post back. And I find that works really well for players who don't necessarily like to write huge posts, or where the action is at a point where a long post isn't needed, stuff like that. It makes things a whole lot more flexible in terms of um, pacing and different abilities and whatever muse you have for a particular thing. 100 is nothing. 100 is next to nothing, but I think you will find that by enforcing a 100-word post count, people will be so utterly fixated on getting to 100 words that once they've got there, that's where they will probably stop. And again, a lot of it is just phrasing. So yeah, go through all of this with your staff team, and bear in mind that again, everything that I say is only an analysis of what I've found works for me, what works for the sort of board that I want to run, and what I have learned through different resource sites and communities. I will be perfectly honest with you, I don't think this reflects who you want to be. I really don't. And the other thing that I would recommend is, if I can find what I'm looking for. So the navigation isn't here. Okay, I'll just go straight through. So in your site rules, what I would do is I would create a new topic that goes through everything that pretty much steps people through the process of registering on your site. So starting from registering an out of character account to, I'll show you mine. Again, I was not prepared for this. Okay, so I've got my quick start guide here. So we go from read the rules, okay, sweet. get your player account, register, introduce yourself. Hey, join Discord. Discord's good. Um, Here's all that useful information for creating a character. So this is where you would list things like um, your want ads and your cannons and all that sort of stuff. Up here you would have your rules. I have one rules topic, so you would have your rules, your chat etiquette, and your posting guidelines. And probably a point in there as well about, okay, if you're going to keep the keywords, make sure people know that these topics are the ones where they can find them. Creating a profile, so here you would have a link to your templates and how to do it, submitting your application, which I do a little bit differently, and then a little bit about edits and reviews and how that reflects how your process is conducted. So whether you leave things for 2 or 3 days requesting for edits or anything like that. So yeah, just an idea of what steps you expect people to take as they get into the board. I'm finding these topics popping up more and more, and there is a good reason for it. They do a lot in terms of helping people find their way around without overwhelming them with tons of information. So you've got your very nice big obvious links there that go, okay, read this topic, then do this thing, and then read this topic and that topic, and this is also useful, and it helps people find their way across your site much more easily. They're also an awesome link to have in your adverts, because it's one link that basically sends them to everything you want them to know. Everything that will teach them about who you are is in this one document, and you can keep updating it and changing it and rewording it as you like. So I feel like I've been very harsh tonight, and I'm sorry for that. But I do feel like there are some things that are letting you down here that are well within your control. Um, there's a lot of promise here. There's a lot of stuff that you have done really well. Just a few issues of readability and, yeah, rewording of the rules is what I would very much suggest. Because I don't believe for a second that the way those rules read is who you want to be and who you want on your site. So yeah, I wish you all the best, and I think you've got something really awesome here, and I hope that this has been more helpful than it has been. What's the word? I hope it's been useful. But then again, it could just be that I do things a very different way. And please, again, if there is something that I have picked on here that is not the way that you want to do it, if you truly, 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 absolutely 110% believe that what you've got is what reflects you as an admin, keep it. Never let me change the way that you play, because all I do is analyze things from the sort of admin that I am. And I'm just a crazy girl in Australia, so I do wish you all the best, and you're welcome to contact me if you've got any issues or questions or anything like that. Thanks for requesting a review, and cheers!